Hello and welcome to Maki's Closet. On today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you a video on how to cut and sew this underburst corset with a keyhole neckline. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button. So let's dive right into today's video. So the first thing I did was to mark out my basic measurement, which is my shoulder to bust, shoulder to underbust, shoulder to waistline, and shoulder to top length. So after I'm done doing that, I'm going to go ahead to mark my shoulder. So my shoulder is 7 inches, that's 14 divided by 2, I have 7, and I'll add half because this particular pattern has sleeve, and I'll go down by 1 inch and connect it to form my shoulder slope. So I'll go ahead and mark my chest line, which is the bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, and from that point I'm going to draw a straight line and I'll connect that line down to my chest line. So from there you're going to go ahead to divide what you have at this point into 2, that is your chest line, and I'm going to fold my tape in this way and I'm going to go in by ½ inch. So from that point, I'm going to go ahead and mark my bust circumference divided by 4 at my chest line, and I'm going to be drawing my armhole curve. So that point is to serve as a guide when I'm drawing my armhole curve. So go ahead and connect from that point down to my chest line, and from that point I'll extend it upwards at the shoulder point. So I'll go ahead and outline it so that it's going to be very visible. So now I'm just going to mark my neckline of 3 inches and I'll be using 2 inches at this point. So go ahead and connect. So you know our pattern is a turtleneck and it's a bit high. So that's why I'm marking 3 by 2 inches. So after now, the next thing is to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. So my nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 inches. So I'm going to mark that. Sorry, I have 3.5 inches. I'll go ahead and mark it at my bust point, under bust point, waist, and I'll go ahead also to mark it at my top length. So after I'm done doing this, I'm going to draw a straight line connecting it. So before I continue, I'm going to extend that line down to the chest line, and I'm going to also go ahead to divide what I have at this point, and I'm going to connect it down. So after I'm done connecting, this is what I have. Now you want to mark your dart intake. So I'll be marking 1 inch at my underbust, and I will also go ahead to mark 1 inch at the waistline. And from my waistline, I'm going to go ahead to extend it down to my top length, like you're going to draw like a slanted line to connect your dart line down to the top length, which is also your hip length. So I forgot to mention the top length I'm making use of is 22 inches. This is more like a full inbuilt corset because of the skirt design we have at the lower part of this dress. So I'll go ahead and connect it. So after I'm done connecting, this is what I have, and the next thing, you want to draw your cup at this point. So now you want to go in by ½ inch from your bust line, and you're just going to outline it this way. So next, you're going to connect from that point. You're going to connect it down to your underbust to draw your cup. So I went ahead to draw this out, but I also extended the cup because I was not satisfied with what I had earlier. So I'm going to place my French curve again and connect. So it's not a compulsory to use a French curve. If you don't have one, you can go ahead and make use of a freehand sketch once you're good at it. So now after I'm done marking out this part, so next I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker and I'm going to outline it. So if you notice at the cup area, I extended it, and this is what I have at this point. So I'll go ahead also to mark out my dart lines at the lower part. So now I'm going to place my tape and mark my bust circumference divided by 4 at that point. So what I have from the armhole to that point I marked, I'm going to divide it by 2. Now I'm going to place my French curve and I'm going to connect it down to my underbust at this point. So after I'm done marking it, I'm just going to go ahead and outline it also. So I'll just go ahead. After I'm done outlining, I'll outline the chest line, and now I'm going to reconnect this. So the reason why I marked the dart intake at that point is just to show you that I'll be sewing up a dart when I'm actually sewing it. So to mark the dart areas, to show the dart areas, I'm just going to mark it out, but bear in mind we'll be cutting the upper part as one. So now you want to insert your body measurement. So I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and there's no dart at this point, and I'll mark my sewing allowance. At the underbust, I'm going to mark the underbust circumference. I'll measure this dart intake because you'll be minusing it. When you're sewing your dart, you'll be sewing it in, and I'll add my sewing allowance. Down to the waistline, I'm going to mark the waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, and I'll replace it and go ahead and mark my sewing allowance. Now at the top length, I'll be marking my hip circumference divided by 4, and I'll be adding my sewing allowance because there's no dart intake. Go ahead also and add like ½ inch in case you're going to have any cut off from the waistline. So now I'm going to connect all my markings. So at the underbust, you find out that that part is protruding out, so no problem. By the time you sew up your dart, is going to go in. So I'm just going to go ahead to outline what I have on this part. So after I'm done doing that, the next thing I'm going to do right now is to work on the waistline. So I want to go up by 2½ inches, right? And I'm going to go ahead to connect at this point. So this is what I have, and I'll outline it. So now the next part we'll be working on is on the upper part of this pattern. So you want to create that pear-shaped effect we have at the yoke. So now to create that, I'm just going to come down by ½ inch at the upper part, and I'll come down by ½ inch at the upper part, and on the lower part, which is my bust line, I'll come up by ½ inch. So I'm just going to connect and draw a shape. So this is more like a free hand, so just look at what you have there. So after that, I'll just go ahead and I will connect or outline my pattern. So this is what I have for this part now, and next thing is to go ahead and cut out this pattern. So at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and leave your comments at the comment section. So after cutting out, this is what I have, and this is what I'll be working with. So we'll be sewing in the darts when we're actually sewing this pattern. So next, let's work for the back parts of this dress. So for the back pattern, I've marked out all the basic measurements, and for the front, if you notice that we didn't make use of bust darts, but still we are still going to achieve the same result. So at the neckline, I went in by 1 inch. So going down to the lower part of this pattern, I will be marking my nipple to nipple divided by 2. So to mark that, I'm going to be marking it at my underbust, and I will mark it at the bust line. Then go ahead and mark it at my chest line, and I'll go down to my top length. So I use the same top length for the front, but when you're sewing an inbuilt corset, the back is always a bit higher, and we'll be doing that later. That's why I mentioned that I didn't use a bust dart, but we are going to achieve the same result at the back. So I like my corset when it covers my bust very well, because I don't have much bust. But if you want yours to fit in very well, go ahead and mark your bust darts. So now I'm just going to mark my darts at the back pattern, mark ½ inch at the waistline, connect it to the hip, and I'll also repeat it for this part. So I'll go ahead and mark my bust circumference divided by 4, mark my sewing allowance, mark my underbust circumference, mark the dart intake, and mark my sewing allowance. At the waistline, I'm going to mark the waist circumference, measure the dart intake, and add my sewing allowance. Now at the hip line, what I have is not enough, but that is not really a problem because we're still going to take this pattern up at the hip point to create that curve at the back that I marked for the front. Also, that's 2.5 inches up, and I'll go up by that line. So this is why I said even if I'm not making use of a bust dart, I'll still achieve the same thing at the back. So I'll go ahead and mark 1.5 inches for my back. That is my lacing bar area. So for this, I'll be making use of a lacing loop. I won't be making use of an eyelet. So either ways, it is still the same process. So now this is what I have, and I'm just going to go ahead to cut out the back pattern. So while cutting it out, also at the yoke part, you notice that I didn't take out this part, so I went ahead to do that. The reason why I'm doing that is to avoid gaping at the yoke, or to avoid the yoke being too big, like on top, having too much space. So after cutting, this is what I have. Now we are moving to the skirt part. Now on the skirt part, to fold your skirt is your hip circumference divided by 4 plus your sewing allowance. So I went ahead to mark my shoulder to waistline, which is 7 inches. From there, I'm going to place back my tape, and I'm going to mark my shoulder to knee point. This is very important, and after I'm done marking that, I'm going to go ahead and come up by 2 inches from that point. Why am I doing this? It's just to give this dress that shape, to bring out the shape from the knee part of the dress. So now I'm going to mark the full length of my skirt, and my skirt is about 38 inches, and I'll be adding 2 inches for folding allowance. So you can also make use of 1 inch, but 2 inches is best for you to do this so that you can have a turn up effect at your skirts. Now on the waistline, you're going to mark your waist circumference divided by 4, and you're going to add your sewing allowance. So whenever I'm sewing a corset or a bustier, I don't add that to my skirt. So if you add that to yours, you can go ahead to do that. At the waist, I'll mark my waist circumference. At the hip, I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4. Go ahead to mark my sewing allowance. So going down, whatever I have at my hip point, which is my hip divided by 4, which is 40 divided by 4, I have 10 plus 2 inches, that's 12. I'll be minusing 2 inches from there, that is 10 inches, and that 10 inches is what I'll be taking down to the down part of my dress. So why am I doing this? Is to give this dress a fitted look at the lower part. So the skirt we actually have on the thumbnail is actually an A-line skirt. So for the fabric I have, I just want to make a straight cut skirt. But if you want to make yours an A-line skirt, go ahead, and I have a tutorial on how to do that, so you can just go ahead to check it out. So I'll go ahead and connect my skirt pattern. This is what I have. I know it's not too perfect, but if yours is perfect, go ahead to do that. So this is what I have at this point, and what I'm going to do is just to go ahead to cut it out. So here is my skirt, and I've gone ahead to cut it out. And for the back pattern, I added my zipper allowance for the back. So now what I'm going to do is to slit the back pattern into 2. So after I'm done cutting it, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please join us in our next video, where we'll be cutting and sewing the actual dress. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and see you in our next video. Thanks.